Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the 6th turn of the Shadowtech Goddess subtitled Cat. Part 3, Chapter 6, the IBBAANA Ball. And once again, I am pleased to announce I will be sharing this reading with the incredible Cass Peace. She returns once again to read the lines of the indomitable Grande Dame Hannah-Ben Shurlamp, EV, Professor, University of D. Given what we already know, how the professor is keen to experiment with extraplanar entities, discover Lord Belmont a Covis, and reap the scholastic rewards that she is so entitled to, we'll see what she has to say about all this, as Kat has managed to worm her way into the good graces of Lord Belmont and his household. What began as a tawdry affair to teach her to read, over the weeks and months, Kat has ingratiated herself with the Belmonts. She finds herself accepted. She has made good friends in the kitchens with the cooks, as she has a job that she was given to help out in the kitchens, and they like her a lot. Even Lord Belmont's sister, Lyra, has taken a shine to Kat, has grown fond of her. And yes, the morose, brooding Lord Belmont, heartbroken over the loss of his Murthic love, Lady Gwendolen, despite himself, finds that he too is growing fond of Kat, that in teaching her to read and teaching her basically everything else, how to count, the names of flora and fauna, the stars, the geography, any topic he chooses to investigate that she knows really nothing of. And she's an eager student, she's a open slate, just waiting to be filled. He finds that he's forgetting all the pain of losing Lady Gwendolen, that with Kat around, he's beginning to live his life again, that the next day is something to look forward to, whether that's this Covis power that Kat is supposed to have at an extraplanar level, or it's just the standard interactions between two people who weren't expecting, or at least he wasn't, each other, but nevertheless have come together and discovered themselves. We'll see how that proceeds. And once again, I welcome the incredible Cass Peace to this reading, and her contribution will be fun. I'm sure you'll all enjoy it. One word on the IBBAANAs. This is the IBBAANA Ball. The IBBAANA is the International Brotherhood of Bars, Actuaries, Attorneys, Notaries, and Accountants. It's a very large organization, generally populated by unathletic types, bean counters, desk jockeys, whatever you want to call them. If you're not an IBBAANA, it's not a prestigious thing. And even though the IBBAANA Brotherhood is a brotherhood, it is populated also by women. There are women in the IBBAANA Brotherhood. Usually in the league, if you have a brotherhood, it's usually mixed, both men and women. If you have a sisterhood, it's always exclusively women. Who made that up, I wonder? Anyways, let's dig in, shall we? Chapter 6, the IBBAANA Ball. An invitation sat out in bold 4D holographics that would trigger only in the presence of an IBBAANA Brotherhood member, which Stenstrom still was. He didn't bother to read it. It was an invitation to the grand IBBAANA Ball at the top of the Mortimer Hotel in Bern, the same one where 2 years ago Gwendolen had accepted his hand. Stenstrom had no intention of going. "Why aren't you going?" Lyra asked, holding the unopened letter. "I don't want to. Bad memories." "Bad memories? Of Gwendolen? How could her memory be bad? Go, Belle, mingle with your friends, have some fun. Here's a novel thought. Take Cat. Cat? Certainly. She's proved she's not a threat. I think she's earned some time out for all her hard work. She would love to go. Stenstrom mulled it over for a moment. Take Cat. He sat on the darkened rooftop overlooking the gray-walled cathedral near the sea. It was raining in a gentle mist, collecting on the sturdy fabric of his HRN. Below the crags and buttresses of the heights, the burnt umber city of Tyrol stretched out in front of him, hugging the coast in blacks and blinking garnets. He had his old mask on again from years ago, when it contained magics to protect his soul from the sister's power. With the stocks of his ents pressed against his ribs, he was all alone and lost with his thoughts. He wore his mask when he was troubled, clinging to its old magic like a favored security blanket. Thoughts of Gwendolen, his fallen love, of the demon, her murderer, and of the antimatter that beckoned to him, beyond his reach, but ever present, and of Cat, the newcomer he never saw coming. After a bit, he smiled and turned. Don't be shy, he said, sensing her presence. Come on, there's room. A lithe form in green bounded to his side from above, managing the heights with ease. Blonde hair pulled back, held in place with one of Lyra's clips, her green black hat clothes cleaned and sorted. Been following me long? He asked as the rain quickened, streaming off of his hat in a gentle spray. For a while now, Cat said. Why do you come here to the rooftops, G? Why do you run? Just chasing dreams, he replied. I have dreams to chase too. Let me run with you. I won't fall. I want to come. She noted the mask on his face. Why do you wear that? He laughed. Not sure, really. I used to need its magics for arcane protection, but those days are past. It's just foolishness, I suppose. Cat reached up and removed the mask. You're too handsome to cover your face, G. She tossed the mask away. It lay on the rooftop, flat, collecting raindrops. You think I'm handsome? He asked. Oh, yeah, she said. I've always thought that. I love looking at your face. Stenstrom moved to the rooftop edge, his face uncovered. Well, come on, then. Let's see if you can keep up. He tore across the skyway, leaping from building to building, TKing with joy. Cat effortlessly followed, bounding on all fours, their laughter unheard on the rainy streets far below. The IBBAANAs had reserved the entire penthouse ballroom and rooftop garden terrace of the stately Mortimer Hotel for the ball, and spared no expense for a night of magic, the place glittering with bright lights and colorful party favors hanging from the ceiling and rolling across the ballroom floor. Expensive catered food lined the walls on streamer-covered tables. Punch and shaved ice in pinks, blues, and oranges was ladled out to sparkling crystal glasses like a poured dream as the full orchestra devoured the silence with cultured, full-beat dance music. Tonight was a night for the studious and rather introverted men and women of the IBBAANA to emerge from their windowless desk jobs and let their collective hair down. Many ladies in fine gowns of assorted colors roamed about the party, some in attendance with certain gentlemen, others alone, waiting to be offered a cigarette. Most of these ladies were members of the league's social circle known as the Ballwigs, beautiful ladies of high social standing who made it their practice to attend balls all over the league, report on the situation, and create gossip. The IBBAANA ball wasn't necessarily a hot A-list event, but the Ballwigs loved to come every year just to see how many shrunken IBBAANA hearts they could break, how many rejected and humiliated IBBAANA pelts they could add to their collection. Most of the Ballwigs were clearly unimpressed with the little IBBAANA men, casting Stenstrom and a few other more desirable fellows occasional hopeful glances. Wearing one of Lyra's finest teal gowns, her blonde hair pulled up and set, the sides of her head freshly shaved, a look she favored, Kat was ready to dance. Standing next to Stenstrom with a glass of punch, she watched the people dancing on the floor, taking it all in, bobbing with the music, observing the steps. After several dances, she banged on Stenstrom's shoulder. "Come on, G! Let's get out there! Let's hit it! Hell yeah!" A bit of nostalgia took him. He had formally asked Gwen for her hand on that floor. "No, Kat, I'm not a good dancer." "Oh, come on!" Some of the IBBAANAs came up, big-toothed, grinning, hands in pockets, asking for Kat's hand to dance. She looked to Stenstrom. "Go on, Kat, have fun." "Ah!" Kat spilled out onto the floor and danced with the gentleman, though she cast frequent glances back to Stenstrom, who lingered in the wings, content to watch. Kat danced, a little clumsy at first, but gaining in skill and polish with every set, the whip of her blonde mohawk moving like a comet. Soon, she was dragging the IBBAANAs across the floor quite well. Small wondering, considering how agile and rubbery her limbs were. She quickly became popular with the IBBAANAs, being whisked from one to another, with many waiting their turn. Many of the Ballwig ladies, some who had wanted little to do with the IBBAANAs at the onset of the party, soon found themselves ignored in favor of the smiling, inviting, approachable Kat. They inserted themselves on the floor like colorful Ballwig marbles, hoping to regain the men's attention, give them hope, and then crush their souls later. As they danced, the gentleman spoke in Kat's ear. She responded by pointing at Stenstrom. Apparently they were seeking to determine her status for the evening. Some of the IBBAANAs approached Stenstrom, asking about Kat. They commented on her fascinating accent. They wondered where she was from, what house she belonged to. They appreciated her unique hairstyle and her decorated shadow mark. They all thought it was a particularly handsome one. It had become a fashion in League society for ladies to paint a mark over their right eye, similar to a black hat's shadow mark. Non-black hat ladies were generally feeling left out a bit, as reformed black hats became more sought after. They countered by painting a mark over their right eye to command the gentleman's attention, and the fashion was spreading. Some, such as the Ballwigs, took the practice quite seriously, forming studious groups dedicated to researching and perfecting the art. Some went as far as to tattoo their chosen marks permanently. Still, those were mere paint. The IBBAANA gentleman had no idea Kat's was a real black hat's mark. All this attention directed at Kat affected Stenstrom. He was determined at the beginning of the evening to sulk and be nostalgic for Gwendolyn. She had danced on that very same ballroom floor, done up to perfection in her fleet uniform. She had taken punch from the same crystal. As the night wore on and Kat was whisked from one eager gentleman to the next, amid the laughter and the approving glances, he became a little possessive. One might even say a little jealous. Kat was his student after all. Why wouldn't he feel that way? Protective, as a mentor might feel towards his charge. He determined that he was, at this point, quite attached to her, perhaps more. He wondered what it would be like not to have Kat there in the library every morning with her pens and paper, awaiting her lessons. He concluded it would be horrible to have nothing to look forward to again but Gwendolyn's shade. That was a lonely place he couldn't bear to go again. He was now certain Kat was indeed special. Whether or not she was some sort of extraplanar creature, a covis, as Professor Shurlamp called it, was irrelevant. With Kat around, the pain was forgotten. Life meant something again. Stenstrom made up his mind to cast aside his dour attitude, to step out onto the floor and occupy a bit of her time. But before he could get started, he heard a cultured, yet commanding voice from a nearby table.
"I'd heard you'd taken up with an urchin from the wild, so I came to see for myself."
Sitting there with perfect straight-up-and-down posture was Professor Hannah-Ben Shurlamp, in her familiar pink and black attire. A teacup sat in front of her. Punch and shaved ice appeared to be well beneath her. Though she was, by any measure, a beautiful woman, her formidable air and relentlessly unavailable presence seemed too much for the IBBAANA partygoers to overcome, and they left her in peace. She took a sip of tea.
It seems you've dressed her up for the occasion. She learns tricks well.
Professor, he said, I didn't know you were a member of IBBAANA. She rolled her eyes.
Of course I'm not. I'm no notary, or attorney, or paid clerk. And I'm not a giggling, strutting ballwig either, though they have begged me to join. There is no party on Cana or beyond I cannot gain immediate entrance to, either via social or technological means.
Stenstrom seated himself across from her. The professor seethed, but in a controlled, ladylike way.
It seems you have a short memory, sir. I recall asking you not to take up with anybody until we have finished collecting data and determined you a suitable Covus.
She tapped her gloved fingers on the tabletop, awaiting an answer.
So then, who is this person?
The music was loud, the good cheer moving across the floor, the uncorking of bottles. Stenstrom had to speak up. I haven't taken up with anybody. Kat is my student. I'm teaching her to read and write LC. And I'm also teaching her to count. And then I'd like to teach her Esther if she's interested.
Cat, is it? How charming. There is no such official language as Esther. It's, as they say, pigeon speech. Might I suggest that there are any number of free shelters, vagrant asylums and convents across Cana which could fulfill such a role, and they are more than qualified to teach an illiterate woman to read, write, and count.
The professor's great brown eyes flashed.
Honestly, I had no idea you had such primitive caprices, sir.
The professor locked him in her gaze.
Get rid of her at once. Send her off. Make her gone immediately. We have work to accomplish.
Thank you, Professor. No, I'm quite happy with Kat. I'm pleased at the progress she's making. And I'll proffer a thought. Perhaps she is this Covus entity you enjoy mentioning. The professor was unimpressed by that declaration.
What, in the name of creation, prompts you to say that?
He shrugged. I feel much better than before I invited her into my home. I feel alive again. I still miss Gwen, I probably always will. But her memory is now in the proper nostalgia. The emptiness, the physical pain I felt at her loss is gone. I'm ready to move forward. The professor ground her teeth.
Impossible. You are not qualified to make that determination, sir. Perhaps your weakness for vagrants has temporarily clouded your judgment. Perhaps you are momentarily intoxicated with lust. I shall determine who your Covus is, and I can assure you she shan't be some identity unknown illiterate, discalculatory refugee from creation knows where. Your Covus will be a person of high regard, from the finest of circles, and from the heights of league society.
Stenstrom looked about the floor. So you're saying my Covus will be an empty-headed ballwig then?
Possibly, but that is irrelevant, isn't it? Your dallying with this vulgar waif from the bush will taint our results, and, at a lesser level, sully your already precarious reputation. So, will you willingly do the correct thing and see her off?
She took another drink of tea.
Or shall I do it for you?
I shan't. I am the master of my fate, not you, and not your bloody computations, which mean nothing. And, by the by, dyscalculia is a brain disorder preventing the sufferer from being able to count. Kat has no such issue. She simply was never taught. The professor smiled.
I had the opportunity to scan your little cat. According to my readings, that shadow mark around her eye isn't merely paint, as is the droll fashion these days, is it? It's a real shadow mark, making her a viable black hat. Shall I inform the sisters of her presence? They don't take kindly to unregistered ex-black hats at Rome in the League, do they? Seems to me they'll simply take her off to Wallenhelm, where, in all likelihood, she will never be seen or heard from again.
Stenstrom shot back. Yes, of course. Assuming we hadn't already taken that step and registered with the sisters ahead of time. He stood up. They have already acknowledged and approved of her presence. I believe this conversation is at an end. Good evening, Professor. Stenstrom walked away to locate Kat. The music rose to a crescendo. Dancers clapped. The professor's steady voice cut through the noise, clear and loud, barging into his ear.
You're going to force me to take action, are you? Very well. I wonder, as you look to all the happy faces in the crowd, sharing the merriment, if they are mere party-goers here for an evening of enjoyment with their peers, or if they have been sent specifically to kill your little harlot. Never force my hand, sir. You've only yourself to blame for the consequences.
He turned to confront the professor. Her seat, occupied only moments before, was empty. Her teacup, partially drunk, sat unattended. Her abandoned spoon clattered to the table. He was certain the professor wasn't one to make idle threats. She was more than capable of having paid assassins here mingling in the crowd of IBBAANAs. Worried, he went out onto the floor, searching for Kat. He pushed through, some of the unattached ballwig ladies getting in his way, smiling, drink in hand, seeking a dance. "You want to offer me a cigarette, don't you?" one of them asked. Assassins in the crowd. "Thank you, ma'am, no." He pushed past the woman. There she was, at the far end of the floor, with 3 IBBAANAs seeking her attention. He quickly made his way to her. "Gee!" she cried, throwing her arms around him. "I thought you'd never get out here. I'm having such a good time. I love dancing. We're gonna dance at home, right?" "Kat, we need to leave. This very moment." "Oh, so soon?" The music pitched up. So many people. "I'll explain later. Let's go." He put his arm around Kat's shoulders, leading her off the floor to the exits. When they arrived, the grand main doors leading to the hotel's lifts were locked. They rattled in their frame as he tried to open them. Through the glass panes was a long, wallpapered corridor, carpeted in tasteful finery, leading a fair distance to the lifts. He saw a familiar figure standing alone at the end of the corridor. Hannah-Ben Shurlamp. She smiled in a ladylike fashion as the lights in the ballroom went off. Confusion. Sudden silence as the orchestra stopped playing. People milled about, wondering what happened to the lights. Somebody dropped a glass. It shattered to the floor with a tink. Then, pop, pop, sounds of bottles uncorking, or the pop of a gun being fired. The crowd in the ballroom undulated in sudden panic. People crushed up against the doors, trying to get out. Stenstrom could pick the locks of the doors, but that would take some time, and there were too many people about. Too many possible enemies in the employ of Professor Shurlamp. Thinking fast, he saw the doors across the ballroom leading to the rooftop terrace were still open. He moved Kat toward them. A group of people bowled into them, separating Kat from his grasp and locking Stenstrom to the floor. "Kat, get to the rooftop! Go as fast as you can! Don't stop for anything!" With a ripping of cloth, Kat formed her shadow check armature and tore out of the ballroom. As she departed, he saw pocks of pulverized plasters forming her way, bullets hitting the wall. Somebody was shooting at her, finding her too fast to target. 3 men were on top of Stenstrom, grabbing at his sleeves, trying to hold him down. A woman came, a wadded-up cloth in her hand. Falling to her knees, she slapped the cloth over his nose and mouth. The cloth was saturated in some sort of knockout agent. The agent was fast, and he would be out in moments, no doubt awakening to find himself Professor Shurlamp's prisoner. The woman was jerked away like a fish on the line, dropping the cloth and pulled out of the terrace doors into the night. Summoning the sister's strength, Stenstrom pushed the 3 men off. He TK'd into the darkened heights above the confusion on the floor and soared out the doors to the rooftop. Outside, On the hedged hotel rooftop, a grinning cat stood over the fallen body of the woman who had tried to knock him out, her Shadowtech tail waving at her back. Lyra's gown was ruined. "Come on, cat," he cried. She extended her tail, wrapping it around his waist. A moment later, she was in his arms as a crowd of people spilled out onto the rooftop after them. Stenstrom, with Cat, soared out past the edge of the rooftop, diving down several hundred feet. He leveled out and continued over the dark waters of the Sea of Albia, soaring fast. Far off, under a cloudy sky stained by city light, the peaceful skyline of Bern twinkled in the distant haze. When he had put a good distance between themselves and the hotel, he slowed. What a debacle! Cat was all smiles in his arms, her hair whipping in the night air. "Hell, that was fun!" she cried. And with that, we conclude Chapter 6, the IBBAANA Ball. So it looks like Professor Shurlamp had had enough of Lord Stenstrom's shenanigans and was going to deal with Cat in her own special way by having her bumped. You never can underestimate Professor Shurlamp. If she says she's going to do something, she does it. And she's not above casual murder to get what she wants, and would have murdered Cat without hesitating. I had thought to kill Professor Shurlamp off. Professor Shurlamp is just too much fun to keep around. I had originally created her to be the opposite number of Lieutenant Kylos's husband, the professor with no name. I've never given him a name. I always just call him the professor, or I call him Professor A to Z. Why I've never given him an actual name, I don't know. But he was always there to provide crucial information when Captain Davidge or his son, Lord Cable, needed information. Kai's husband, the professor, was always there to offer it, and can find pretty much the answers to anything, given he you give him a reasonable amount of time to research and get the info. He's not a superhero or anything. He needs to do the research. And I created Professor Shurlamp to be sort of his opposite number, an equally formidable intellect over on the other side of Cana. But she began to grow, she became the de facto leader of a criminal enterprise. Will basically take other people's work and appropriate it, steal it for the most part, go through it, correct it, make it better, fix it if it needs fixing, and then publish it herself. The professor has a very dumpy, very uninspiring, very average husband, a teetotaler. He's a little guy. He's not all that smart. The way I've written him, he almost seems mentally impaired to some extent. And he's not her match, either physically or intellectually. She's a very beautiful woman, and he's kind of a dumpy dude. But she loves the guy for whatever reason, and he is probably the only person in the league safe from her wrath, should it be incurred. Anywho, that's Chapter 6. Stenstrom is finally starting to admit to himself that he likes Cat. Maybe that he is able to move on from the loss of Lady Gwendolyn with Cat, a person he never would have expected, never saw coming. In his sorceress ways, he believes in signs and portents. He believes that nothing can really happen that hasn't been foretold to some extent in, reading the tea leaves or the signs or, the turn of the leaf and so forth. But Cat, he had no clue. He had no idea she was out there, or what she was capable of as a person, as a human being, that she would be able to get in there and make him feel alive again. So we move on next week to Chapter 7, and that is the final chapter in Part 3. We will then move on to Part 4. Then Chapter 7 is known as Those Who Were Remembered, and we'll see how that goes. A note on the Ballwigs, these sect of ladies who just love to toy with men and break their hearts. And they'll do it to women too if the case presents itself. They love to show up and flirt and then get you on the hook and then snap you off. And they have a point system where if you're asked to smoke a cigarette, and yes, I have been called out by people who say that I promote smoking or I glorify smoking, and I guess I do a little bit, but not really. I mean, we're all adults here. You can smoke if you want. In the league, it's a custom for gentlemen at a ball and they see a lady they'd like to spend some time with to offer her a cigarette. And if she accepts it, she is obliged to give him her attention while she smokes it. And then, they can talk freely and perhaps a rapport will be struck. And then once the cigarette is done, her obligation is over and she can move on if she wishes. The ballwigs have a point system. If they get offered a cigarette, that's like 10 points. If they offer to buy you a drink, that's more points. If they invite you to come to their manor or home, that's even more points. And then you get the big ones. If they ask you to dance, that's even more points. If they tell you they love you, that's a huge point allotment. That's a coveted point go-getter right there, is I love you, to utter those words. And some even say, though this is unconfirmed, if they can get you to commit suicide over their broken heart, then that is like a coveted status within the ballwigs. And I created them a long time ago. After I graduated from high school, I was hanging out with my friend. He was a bartender at a local hotel with a restaurant and pub, and in walked two girls that we had gone to high school with. I was like a freshman in college at this point, and they both walked in and they said hello as they knew us a little bit, and then they sat down at the bar and immediately took off their wedding rings, and their goal was to see how many guys they could get to flirt with them, to buy them drinks or maybe ask them to dance. And then when the evening was over, say sorry, married, that sort of thing. And that always stuck with me, and that was the genesis of this sect, the ballwigs. And their symbol, as I've placed up here in the reading, is a har-sprung. It's like a kind of a rabbit-like creature. It's a legendary animal in Vith lore. But the har-sprung is said to be uncatchable, that they go and enter fields and so forth, and take the best that the field has to offer, the cream of the crop, so to speak. And they're very difficult to catch, almost impossible to catch. Though if you do manage to catch a har-sprung, you are offered a bounty of riches for its release. So that is the symbol of the ballwigs, is the har-sprung, the uncatchable mythical creature of Vith lore. Anyways, we will continue next week with the final chapter in part 3, chapter 7, Those Who Were Remembered. Until then, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out, my friends.